In this clip we're going to take the phrase we've been working on in the last couple of tutorials and put it alongside the phrase we worked on in the first couple of tutorials. So we've got the phrase here that we have been working on recently with the imperfect cadence, creating a sort of open ending in the music, and then the original little phrase we had from the earlier tutorials in the third and fourth bars with its perfect cadence, bringing the little piece to a close. So we've got effectively like two hymn phrases here. I've put in the top, using the top-down method, the chords that I had. And what we're going to do is just go through and recap some of the things we've been talking about. So we've been using only primary chords, that's chords 1, 4 and 5. We've looked at using 5, 7. We've only really used root position chords, although we did use the first inversion chord at this point here, second bar, in order to avoid parallels. So we've avoided parallel octaves and parallel fifths. In this case it was a parallel octave, C to D, C to D. We've also looked at using a first inversion chord here for the dominant 7 chord, just to spice up the chord a little bit. We've got the F sharp in the bass, the C and the soprano making a diminished fifth, and then the 7th falling. Remember that the 7th must fall in a dominant 7th chord, and the leading note here rising up. We also noted that we don't want to double the third in our first inversion chords, or indeed any chord, but the third is in the base of a first inversion chord, so we don't want that third to appear anywhere else in that chord. So what we're going to do now is put in some little additional things. We're going to talk about passing notes, and what we're going to do is just insert some extra notes just to smooth out some little moments. So if you look here in the second bar, we have a G going to an E. Those are a third apart, and what we can do is just join that third up to make it a stepwise motion by adding in what's called a passing note. I usually stick a little P over the top of it just when I'm doing my working, just so I remember that that is definitely a passing note. It's not just some note that's falling on the page from somewhere. So I intend that note to be a passing note. And so what is a passing note? Well, it's a dissonant note. That F sharp does not fit in chord 1. Chord 1 is G major, G, B, D. The F sharp does not fit it, and its function is merely to join one consonant pitch to another. So joining this G to this E. The G is in chord 1, the E is the third of chord 4, and it joins it up. It must move by step. You can't go stepwise then a leap. For example, it must be stepwise, and that's the definition of a passing note. So that's one thing we might do there. The other thing we might do to make it a little bit more interesting, with particularly our final cadence, is take this D, and I could make that D a C. What does that do? What that does is we've now got D, F sharp, A, C, which are the notes of our dominant 7th chord. There, that's fine. This is all coming downwards. The C is coming downwards effectively to this B here. So the 7th is falling. So that makes a slightly stronger cadence here. We've got our 5, 5, 7 at this point here. Something else we might do is actually not have that. We'll just take the C back out. It's quite common to find the 7th being put in not on the beat, but as a passing note. So coming down as a passing note rather than moving on the beat. So that's very, very common. So there we have it. We've got our two phrases, and we've inserted a passing note here, and this technically is it a passing note? Isn't it? It's the 7th of the chord, so it's passing down. So it is technically a dissonant note because the 7th is dissonance. So it's like a passing 7 coming down there. So we'll listen to the whole thing to hear how it now sounds. So that's not too bad. The passing notes just make it all a little bit more interesting. Okay. Some key points down here to the bottom right of your screen. And number one, the crucial one, is avoid parallel octaves and fifths. Up here at the top, we've got this little chart again, just shows us what parallel octaves are and what parallel fifths are. There's an interesting point here as we go from the end of the first line to the start of the second line. You'll notice that we have a D in the bass which goes upwards to a G, and a D in the top part, melodic part, coming downwards to a G. Okay, that's in contrary motion. Because it's octaves in particular, what we want to do is avoid that, because essentially it's kind of like parallels. It's an octave D going to an octave G. So we want to really avoid that. And one thing we can do is just change the inversion. We spoke about that before when we changed the inversion of this chord 4 in order to avoid parallel octaves with the C and the D here. So we've changed the inversion, can change the inversion here by making that a B, and it's getting quite close to the melody part now, so I'm going to put that B down the octave here. Okay, so we've got a B there, and that's the third of the chord. I've got a B here, which is also the third of the chord, and remembering point 2 here, we don't want to double the third, so using my top down method I'm going to bring that note there down to a G. Okay, so that solves the problem of parallels, it solves the problem of doubling the third. What we might want to do though is look at this chord now and compare it to this chord. How do the notes go from one chord to the other? Well, the top note, the D, it's going down to a G, that's fine. The A, that's the melody, so it's the case. The A there is dropping down to a D, so that's both those notes are falling quite a distance. And then this bottom note, the F sharp, is falling all the way down to a G. So that's like a melodic, well, it is a melodic seventh, and that's not ideal. If this were a vocal piece, an SATB choral piece, that would be really very awkward and not ideal. So what we're going to do is actually undo this G, go back up the way to our B, can't have that, and go to this D, and actually just have two parts on the D and one part on the G. So we've got two on the D, one on the G, and we've got our single third of the chord there. Okay, so now we've got the D coming down to a G, A dropping down to D, or indeed we could put the D up to a G, have two notes on the G, and the F sharp here coming down to a D. So it doesn't actually matter whether we're doubling D or doubling the G. And in practice on the score, we take it out, we don't actually show it. So we're just going to show the two notes and imagine in our head that one of them is being doubled in a sort of choral sense, SATB sense. This now smoothly moves on to the next chord, so the G rising to the A and the D staying on the D, and then either moving to an F sharp or the G coming down to an F sharp. So it's just, even though it's a kind of more of a pianistic texture, trying to keep things moving in a nice smooth fashion. Something else we might think about doing, we've been talking about passing notes in this little clip, is we might decide, okay, we'll stick a passing note in there. So that's quite good, we've got a passing note in there. Let's listen to how it sounds now. However, you may have spotted already that there's a bit of a problem with that. Sometimes when we insert a passing note, we actually create problems. So be very wary of inserting passing notes. When you put them in, you have to check that you haven't actually inserted a parallel by doing that. So we've got a G here, G moving to A, and this G does sound simultaneously with this C. C to G is a perfect fifth, and that's going to D to A, which is also a perfect fifth. So what effect we have here is parallel fifths as the piece moves from this point to this point. So it would be a nice idea to have had the passing note in there, but unfortunately on this occasion it's not possible, so we're just going to put this back to being a crotchet. One nice passing note that we could potentially have, however, is here. making this a C, coming down to this B. I'm going to check that we haven't got any parallels, so C up to F sharp, A and D. None of those form a perfect octave, perfect fifth, so I'm not actually going to insert a parallel octave or fifth in this instance. And what that does is it actually, it's a passing note D, C down to the B, but it's actually a passing 7 in the bass. The C is a 7th of chord 5, 7. So this is now 5, 7, and the C falls downwards by step to the B as you'd expect the 7th to do. Let's have a listen to it. We'll be able to hear how it now sounds.